Good afternoon and welcome to the Public Services Committee meeting. The meeting will start in 30 seconds and Committee Member Sire has been activated.
Calling the Public Services Committee meeting Monday, May 9th at 5:44 to order. First item will be review and approval of minutes dated April 11th, 2011.
Move approval, Erpenbach.
Second, Aguilar.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and that passes. Our next item on the agenda will be pawnbroker and dealers in precious metals and gems ordinance. At this time, I would like to have our audit department come up and give a review of the audit report that was dated October 2010.
Thank you. Rich Oaksel from Internal Audit, and this was a special request from Councilor Anderson that we completed, I believe, last fall and presented to the City Council. We had several recommendations. One of the most important, which was addressed in this revised pawn shop ordinance proposed by the police department, was the 90-day holding period, that after 90 days, if there's been no action on a particular item, that the pawn shop can do with the item as they see fit, unless they've gotten some action on that. Because what we'd found when we did the audit was that some of the items had been on hold for long periods of time with no action. No communication with the pawn shop. So we supported that. One of the recommendations we did have concerned more of an operation procedure that would not be addressed in ordinance. It had to do with communication with the pawn shops. We thought that could be improved. Having some sort of a spreadsheet online that a pawn shop could log into and see what the status was on a particular item, but that would not be something that would be addressed in ordinance. We just thought that'd be a way of communication could be enhanced with the pawn shop. So, and treating all the various vendors alike as much as possible, it was something that we supported, that we saw in the ordinance. So, I don't think anybody, certainly not the police department, is proposing that the reimbursement fund be reestablished. That was one thing that we looked at. That had been discontinued in March of last year, where the pawn shop would receive a cash reimbursement for something that was taken. That was something we found that we couldn't find any other local government that had such a fund in place. And we thought it would be better that the court system would decide if any reimbursement were to take place, that they would make that decision. So we supported the discontinuance of that reimbursement fund. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Any questions? All right. Thank you, Rich.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any response from the City Attorney's Office or Police Department?
Just real briefly, Keith Allenstein, City Attorney's Office. Only thing that I have, unless anybody has any questions, are that there's in the definitional section, I don't know if you have a clean or dirty copy of the ordinance, but on the clean copy, it's on page 3. The definition of secondhand goods dealer. On the dirty copy, it's on page 4, I believe. Some language in there where it talks about media of electronic devices. We need to add back in the language, so it would be media of electronic devices, computers, and other digital devices, so that it meets up with the definition of that, which appears just immediately prior to, or not immediately, 1, 2, 3, about 4 definitions prior to the secondhand goods dealer. So just a minor correction so that what we're talking about in there matches up with the definition as we have it earlier. And other than that, the ordinance is, as far as the police department is concerned, in its final state and ready to go.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Any questions from the committee members? None? Okay, thank you, Keith.
Thank you.
Kenny,
Conversation?
I would like to hear from Sergeant Matt Burns. He had sent the committee a letter giving an example of why the ordinance is helpful or could be helpful. And if you could relay that message so the public also
Yes.
can hear that.
Matt Burns with the Police Department, Sergeant Property Crimes. At the last meeting, you had a specific question about the amounts of stolen property and how that related to the annual report. And specifically, when it comes to the report, we don't relate things in an overall value amount, but what we do when it comes to values is stratify them as to felony and 2 levels of misdemeanors, Class 1 and Class 2. And so I just wanted to clarify a couple points as to that. In reference to specific numbers, I pointed out there was approximately 40 NCIC hits. And what I mean by that is when we enter an item into NCIC as stolen property, we can only do so typically if we have a serial number associated with that item. And so over the past year, since May 1st, when I had offered that, 40 NCIC hits doesn't sound like a lot, but as a matter of context, in that same time period, we had over 7,800 items reported to us as stolen. Of those 7,830 items, 536 were reported with serial numbers, so that's a small percentage. So we can only, from that number, we can only enter those items of those 536 if all of them met the specific criteria to enter. So as you can see, we keep paring down in our numbers to ultimately come to that 42. So it actually amounts to about 7.8% of the 536 items that reported to us we actually got hits on in Leads Online from our local reporting shops. Now, statistics can tell you one thing, but as a practical matter, a recent case that came before us stemmed from a large retailer in Sioux Falls. An employee from that retailer was having a conversation with an employee from actually a pawn shop, and that retailer employee related to them a story or a concern they had where they were missing several specific electronic devices of a certain type, a certain variety, and as it is an ongoing case, I'll try to keep things kind of general. It turns out that this pawn shop employee said, you know, that sounds very familiar to me. We've had a great deal of those very similar items come into our shop. And so they kind of got to talking amongst each other and decided that this was not coincidental. A report was made with us. The detective that looked into the matter found a name, got the name from the pawn shop employee, and it turns out that between March 28th of this year and April 15th, that person had pawned 47 of these items. 47 of these items within that small time period. The retailer wasn't able to provide serial numbers on all those items as they were out for retail sale, but that gives you an idea and kind of illustrates the point on many of these items. They don't come with NCIC. You know, we're not able to enter those into NCIC, but it speaks to the larger scale, much larger scale, frankly, of the problem when it comes to stolen property ending up in our own shops. It's that very property that we're trying to track where we can and certainly recover for victims, be they a business entity or you know, an individual citizen. So this isn't a new problem. This is a phenomena that we've seen time and time again in property crimes. We know that there's large numbers of stolen items out there that simply don't come down to the identifiable level.
Any other questions? Michelle?
One question. I'm trying to understand the NCIC thing, and I read your report earlier too, but if those two folks hadn't known each other, would we have eventually found those things on Leads Online? Would that system have worked for us as well?
Probably not. Since at that time there wasn't even a report that had been generated. It was only because of that conversation that a report was generated. But be mindful that even if a report is generated, if there are not serial numbers provided for the detective to then enter into the system for an actual hit to occur, that would correspond with the data that was inputted by the pawn shop into Leads Online per the current ordinance. So there's a lot of steps that have to fall in place. So it's very likely, very likely that that would have not come together in that way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
I guess the one part of the story I really did like is the cooperation between the police department and the pawn shop. That's how we're going to find more stolen items, is having that cooperation and not having the perception, true or untrue, that the pawn shops are being treated like an accessory to the crime instead of a victim. And I think that some of the changes you guys have made into this ordinance will help us get to that point. And that's what I'm looking for. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or open to the public? Is any comments from our pawn shop dealers out in there, or precious gems, clocks?
Council people, I'm Bob Colby. I've been involved with the buying and selling of antiques for 1st of June will be 39 years. And the way the ordinance is written, when it says second-hand goods dealers, everything I buy to sell is second-hand goods. When it talks about precious gems or gold or silver, I don't overtly go out to buy that, but if I buy a quantity of things from someone, there might be 3 or 4 pocket watches, one might be a gold one. The way the ordinance is written, I'm fair game. I'm not involved in this particular ordinance as such, but I'm fair game because the ordinance is written so broadly. It doesn't say specifically. It does mention pawn shops. It does mention licensing, but I published the Antique Dealers Directory for Sioux Falls and have since 1982. Excuse me. And for other antique dealers in the southeast corner of the South Dakota, southwest Minnesota, and northwest Iowa. All of us deal with second-hand goods. Generally speaking, in the courses that I've taught about antiques, when you talk about that, the accepted norm is something that's a 100 years prior date. In other words, something that was made before May 9th, 1911 would qualify as an antique. There are other things that people call collectibles. A lot of people collect things from the 1950s. It's still second-hand goods. How am I exempt from this? I'm not wanting to put my records of my clientele out there for people to look at. I've been reading this ordinance, and it's saying that you send things to, some entity way out here that takes care of things. I was thinking, well, if this is the case, if this is a way to serve the public and to get things, to get criminals, I would think that all bank records should go to a central source, because bad check writers get checks from banks. So you should have all the check writing information go to a central authority to cross-reference to see who's the bad check writers around the world or around the country. You could do the same thing with Mexican restaurants, because most of the illegal aliens are probably going to eat at Mexican restaurants, and therefore you would have a source to cross-reference to see about all of the illegals that might be wandering around. Auctioneers, they are exempt from this or are not mentioned, and they sell second-hand goods, and a lot of people might steal it and sell it at an auction. But there's no record there that is being put in a central authority. And I would think that maybe even Olivia's, is that the place up here in north that has the adult toys? It would seem that all the people who do business there should have their name and addresses should be sent to a central authority, because you're probably going to have a better chance of catching sex offenders then. Sometimes I think this is stretching the line a little bit. When I had some relationship with the county, why there were HIPAA authority, You couldn't find diddly squat about a person's medical records. Insurance companies can't use your personal medical information, but if I go and buy something at a pawn shop or I sell something to a pawn shop, my name's on a record. I'm thinking that's just a little bit of a stretch on the, how would you say, the privacy ordinances, and I think I made my point, but I, for one, as an antique dealer, feel when I read this ordinance, I'm dead meat. I'm secondhand. I occasionally get gold. I occasionally have had silver dollars. I've occasionally had gold watches. The only thing that I do is that if I have some suspicion on something, I'll buy it with a check to make sure that it's a CYA for myself. But if it looks like it's a little bit, or I have a feeling, I just probably decided that that's probably not a piece of merchandise I want to buy at the moment because I just don't have the money. They can go somewhere else. Then I don't have to deal with the feeling that maybe I bought some stolen property from somebody, but I don't know who. I have had that happen. I have called the police when someone told me they had something that was stolen. It came in my shop. I called the local police. They got the guy. He skipped town. He went to California. I think he reoffended, and he probably wished he were back in Sioux Falls, but at least that's my position at the moment. And thank you for letting me borrow your ears.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Colby? Vernon?
Actually, not for Mr. Colby, but maybe Keith could address some of his concerns in terms of an antique dealer.
Well, I'm not familiar with all the purchases that Mr. Colby makes, but under our current ordinance, if you buy anything, any article made of, in any way, shape, or form, a precious metal or precious gem, currently Mr. Colby would be required to report as of today. So this proposed ordinance does not change that whatsoever. As far as a secondhand goods dealer, perhaps dragging in more things, I'm not exactly sure, unless it would be an electronic device, what we're talking about here. We list specifically the secondhand goods that we're regulating. Portable electronic appliances, power tools, toolboxes, electronic devices, stereos or components thereof, the computers. So the idea with writing this is that it wouldn't catch all those antiques, the doilies, as we mentioned before, and those kind of things. So I'm not familiar with what all items that are purchased, but if there's a precious metal or a precious gem as part of anything that he buys currently, and since I believe probably about the 1950s, there's been a reporting requirement on that. Anything else, like I said, the only thing I could potentially see would be an electronic device that may trigger some additional reporting.
Any further questions? Guess I have one that came up to me also, is that if this ordinance does go through, some of the new businesses that will fall underneath the reporting to the leads online, are we, especially with some of the smaller businesses, have we looked into a grace period to allow them, some of those businesses, like Mr. Colby is not the big internet savvy person or anything, and may not have a computer at his business. Are we going to give those businesses some type of grace period to be able to get acclimated and ready to turn in their information to leads online if that's what the council determines?
Well, I think that certainly the idea of the police department is not to just start tagging people with ordinance violations for not complying with this. The idea is to gain compliance through licensing, and I know we've had one of the present shops, the pawn shops in town. I believe we've only had one that had any issues with any kind of computer lack of knowledge as far as computers go. It's an easy process. Sergeant Burns sat down with that individual, got him started up. Like I said, I'll let Sergeant Burns address the police department's specific criteria. We haven't discussed a specific grace period, but again, the idea is to get these things reported so we can get them back to the people who had them stolen. It's not to create a bunch of rules so that we can go, I gotcha, and go write people ordinance violation tickets.
And then another,
Just to respond to you, just in conversation, that because this is public information, and because we're going to be talking about it in depth in a first and second reading, and then it has to be 20 days before it's becomes law because of the publication requirements. There's a lot of time in there for folks to be aware. I would be comfortable with the way
and it
it
was
is.
just a question that I was asked that I wanted to bring up
Yep.
so that we could actually publicize that.
Right,
So,
exactly. Yeah.
The other question would be, part of the ordinance talks about suspension or revoking of licenses. What will be the due process if a business says they don't want to report to Lead Online? How are we going to process with that?
Well, we're actually going to bring that up later on. It'd be an administrative decision. It would be handled through administrative appeal.
Okay.
Just like any other licensing issue. I don't have the specific statutes or ordinances in front of me, but they discuss any license can be suspended or revoked for violation of state, federal, local law. It would be the same idea there, same appeal process, administrative appeal, and on from there.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Sergeant Burns, you had something that you wanted to add to this?
I was just going to add that if there's any concern at all on the part of the council about getting any new businesses brought into this under the proposal up to speed, I mean, I've worked with some current business owners now and to get that, and some individuals who had very, very little to no experience with computers, and with just cooperation and working with them, and just an understanding on both our parts that the kind of information that we're looking for. And we were able to get them up to speed pretty quickly and to their satisfaction without a lot of stress.
And if possible, could I request that you speak with Mr. Kobe here and maybe try to alleviate some of his concerns also?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I know that this would, they probably had all the information that was put out to the pawn shops. There might have been some of the coin shops. But I see a plethora of places around town that have "We Buy Gold." Okay, how do you get a hold of those folks and let them know that they are being part and parcel of this whole operation? All of the antique shops here, we used to have a shop that dealt particularly with sterling silver. And I know that there was no reporting ever done on that. I know that most of us who buy these sorts of things, this is not a major percentage of our business in the course of a year. It's less than 10%, it might be less than 5%, it might be 1 or 2%. But because of the way the ordinance is written, we are not aware of what is going on, and that we are going to have to shy away from that sort of business. When you buy a household of things, or somebody brings in a box full of stuff, you're going to say, well, I can buy all this, but it's too much trouble to buy that. And you're going to, somehow or other, these other people are going to have to be made aware of this. Plus, if they are only within the confines of the city of Sioux Falls. So in other words, all this merchandise then will drive it over to T and Lenox and Harrisburg and Worthing and Canton and Del Rapids and other places around. So I don't know that that's going to alleviate the problem. It just moves it out of town. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions, comments?
Councilor Anderson, I'm going to move to send this forward to the full council.
Second, Erpenbach.
Okay. With that, it'll be up to a vote then, and those who approve, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and those against say aye. Aye. So it is 3-1, it will go to the council then.
Okay.
All right, then our next item would be administrative appeals ordinance, and I believe we'll have David Floofy from the city attorney's office. I also want to remind anyone attending the meeting to please sign in. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Dave Fifley with the City Attorney's Office. We had requested that we be placed on your agenda to at least initiate the discussion regarding a revision, a complete overhaul of the administrative appeals ordinances, and those are found in Chapter 2-60 to 2-66. I beg your indulgence for just a moment to just kind of talk about the history and get to where we are today. I've learned in my 9 months as your city attorney that institutional history is very valuable knowledge. And what I've learned in particular is these administrative appeals ordinances have really been in use ever since we have, as a city, decided about 7 years ago, we took the code enforcement cases and placed them not in a criminal sanction status, but in a civil sanction status. And that was done with council input, from what I understand, in terms of trying to gain compliance, yet not put the stigma of a criminal violation upon the citizen. And through this process, we're happy to state, and Kevin Smith was here just a few weeks ago, we have 85 to 90% compliance by the citizens of our town. And our town is a beautiful city because of that compliance. And it's a safe city overall, thanks to our citizens complying for the most part. I want to leave you with that positive message as I go towards the negative part of it. Our office gets to deal with the more difficult cases that occur when we don't get that compliance. Fortunately, it's about 350 cases a year that come to our office where people are given chances by a department to comply with a code that's been adopted by this council. They're not complying. They throw up their hands. What are we going to do? Send them to the attorney's office. What I learned since I've been here is that I didn't want to come to this council right away and suggest a bunch of changes without having a chance to look at it in practice, what is currently available. And we hired Paul Bankford, who does our code enforcement cases, 6 months ago. And I wanted to give Paul a chance to see that process in action. And just so this committee is aware, we've talked to city councilors, we've talked to members of the bar, we've reviewed the Administrative Procedures Act, which is found in South Dakota Codified Law 1-26. And we've also talked in particular with our attorneys, outside counsel who've been representing the city on legal challenges to our current ordinances for the administrative appeals process. And with that discussions and with that background, we also I personally looked at about 30 other municipalities to see what they were doing with their administrative appeals. I don't have my research trail notes with me, but I would guess approximately 2/3 of those communities had very similar appeals ordinances to what we currently have. And I am not here to say that we believe our current ordinances are in violation of due process rights, but like any human-made thing or institution, there's always room for improvement. And the important thing I think we need to keep in mind here is that due process is a very fluid concept, and it's evolving, and through the courts, we always have a new sense, heightened sense of what it actually means. And in this instance, I think the most important thing would be public perception and confidence in this system is so vital for its success. And I know in talking with some of you, you share those same goals and concerns. And we hope with what we've come up with as a proposal, and this is certainly something that we're not married to. If you would like to revise it further, we wanted to present it to the committee today just to start that discussion process. But we believe that these will go a long way towards satisfying some public concerns regarding the administrative appeals process, and will also address even the legal challenges that have been made to that appeals process. So, in short, the timing of this was based simply on that internal review process being allowed to take place, getting your input, some of your input, and also input from others. And here we are presenting today. I will go just very briefly, kind of a broad overview of what we have proposed. I have Paul Bankford here also, who can also answer your questions. Paul has been more in the trenches, shall we say, with what we're proposing. We have shared this with some of the code enforcement team, so to speak, and I think we may be getting more input if we're allowed to have maybe another month and maybe present this, Mr. Chairman, with your indulgence, to present it perhaps again, just to continue this discussion. I think we'll get a very good piece of legislation with all of that input, and certainly your input and expertise as well. Section 2-60, and all the changes are noted in blue on the handout, but essentially the biggest change, I'm not going to read word for word what the changes are, you can all see it, but essentially the biggest change is right now we have a choice between either using a 3-director panel or having an independent hearing examiner be retained in order to hear the appeal. We've heard complaints from citizens. They come into the appeal hearing and they see that there are 3 directors there. Frankly, to put it in layman's words, they don't feel like they're getting a fair shake. We, as an attorney's office, have moved away from that. It's an either-or proposition. We've already moved away from it. We are currently using an independent hearing examiner. And I've placed language in the proposal that makes it so that person would be a member in good standing of the State Bar of South Dakota. And that will serve a lot of purposes. It will allow that person to be trained in the rules of evidence, civil procedure, and certainly be someone who can weigh the evidence carefully. Like any federal, state, or judge, they're also paid by that governmental entity. And here the city would be paying the independent hearing examiner, yet they would be independent. And the courts have continuously recognized that even though, say, a state court judge is paid technically by the state of South Dakota, they can hear independently and impartially a case involving the state of South Dakota. Currently, we have already contracted with Dustin DeBoer, who is a local attorney. He has about 7 years of practice experience as a defense attorney, and he was also in the state's attorney's office for about another 7 years. So he has seen both sides of the equation, and so far our experience with him has been very good. He's weighing the evidence carefully and understanding the issues and coming to a just result. Again, we're not concerned with result, but process here. The other attorney that we would like to contract with is Gary Caldwell, who's our former city attorney and has been in practice for 38 years. Gary has probably defended thousands of cases and probably prosecuted another thousands of cases. His wealth of knowledge and experience will be invaluable to us, and we believe he'll do a wonderful job. And as the need arises, we may need to contract with others. Budget-wise, this will affect the city attorney's budget. Anytime you increase the amount of protections, I need to warn you that it does cost you. We anticipate, in terms of our budget for 2012, we'll propose to you that we add an additional $15,000 to our professional services line item. We hope that that will take care of the administrative process in terms of the hearing examiners. Right now, that's our best educated guess. Paul has actually been instrumental in drafting the contracts for those, and he can explain to you in more detail what those are, but we hope that those costs will be within reason. The remainder of that proposal is just to more, in essence, provide the citizen in the next portion in terms of what the notice of appeal should contain. It gives a very easy roadmap so that any citizen can pull up the ordinance and understand, oh, this is what I need to include, this is what needs to be done to get this process started. We've also increased the time frame to be more citizen-friendly from 10 days to 15 days to give a person more chance to come in and appeal that decision, sleep on it for a little over 2 weeks, And our main consideration also was, what if someone's out of town? It seems to be that with our mobile society, sometimes a person is gone for 8 or 10 days from their home or something, and we just want to give that person a chance to appeal that decision if they want to. The other interesting portion of the 2-60 section is that, and this was at the suggestion of a member of the council, that we have a processing fee. Again, I've already alluded to the increased costs that we will incur as a result of hiring an independent hearing examiner to hear these cases. This processing fee, frankly, is to have people have some skin in the game. The experience I've had is similar, as I used to do a lot of pro bono cases for a referral service, and we were allowed to donate as many hours as humanly possible or as we saw fit towards that pro bono client. But we did not have the authority to pay any court filing fees for that person. And no matter how indigent they were, this pro bono referral service said, you know what, to keep anything from being frivolous, we're going to make sure that that person, no matter how indigent, has to pay a filing fee, the court filing fee. And back then it was $50 or $65, depending on what the case was. There's no real magic to the $50 figure. It will not cover our costs, but it's just significant enough to keep that person from filing something frivolous. The nice part is the hearing examiner can take into consideration if that person is indigent and waive the filing fee. And even if it's not waived, you'll notice later on, we can actually have the filing fee or the processing fee rewarded back to that party that appealed if they prevail on appeal. So if you have a meritorious case, you'll get your $50 back. The other provisions I'll just go over very briefly. I thank you for your indulgence. But on Section 2-61, we changed the number of days in our proposal, frankly, so we can schedule more easily for both the appealing party and for the city. What we were finding is it was extremely difficult to get an appeal hearing that would satisfy everybody's calendar. This gives us just a little bit more leeway. What we'd like to do is have 2 hearing examiners each take 1 day a month. So we have a day for hearings about every 2 weeks. We think this will be very citizen-friendly. It'll be easy to schedule. If we have any potential witnesses on the city side, everybody will know, okay, the first and third Thursday of the month, I better be careful with my vacation schedule if I'm involved in, say, code enforcement, so that we can plan that accordingly. But still, it maintains that keeping it timely so that the evidence is fresh and a hearing would take place within a timely manner. Section 2-62 is where a lot of the other due process concerns are being addressed. Under Subpart 1, we're having, similar to the Administrative Procedures Act under South Dakota State Statute, we're having as our proposal to you that the rules of civil procedure and the rules of evidence be adopted and governing that hearing. In the administrative appeals that I've been involved with over the years, I've seen certainly hearing examiners who are law trained be able to quickly make those types of rulings. It's not as formal and full-blown as, say, a court trial, but yet it provides more procedures and protections, and I think it'll increase citizen confidence in the procedure. We've accepted a couple of things on what I would call foundation laying of documents, so that if there's, say, someone who has a document out in Wisconsin, we don't have to bring them to Sioux Falls to say, yeah, this is XYZ document that I keep in my normal course of business. And there are several examples in state law where foundation argument or requirements are at least relaxed, and this would be a very specific thing. And I think it would pass any due process test. And in particular would be, say, the red light camera instances where we could lay foundation a little bit easier. The other portion is subset 4. The way we've been working it, we've always viewed it in our office, at least since I've been here, is we essentially have the burden of proof. This codifies it. So there is no question. The city will have the burden of proof, not the citizen appealing. Has the city made the right decision? City, prove up your case. And the case would be by a preponderance of evidence, which is more likely than not. It's not like your criminal proceeding where you're beyond a reasonable doubt. This is merely a weighing of the evidence test. Who's more credible? Subpart 5 just adds some considerations for our more diverse community. In case there's some interpreter services that are needed, we felt that should be codified so that there isn't any question on how that should happen. Section 2-63 also discusses rights of the parties at the hearing. And again, if you want to stop me at any time with a question, go ahead. Otherwise, I'll just keep kind of doing the broad overview. But subpart 5 talks about the ability to subpoena witnesses or documents for the hearing. I know this has been a criticism of the current process, and we're requesting of the council that they codify it in ordinance that the administrative hearing officer is allowed to issue subpoenas to either witnesses or for documents. And currently, with the public records laws, I think a citizen could already get whatever documents they need, but this just further codifies it. Where it will be interesting, and frankly, we're still kicking this around a bit, is under state law, you have to pay a witness fee of $20 plus mileage. And for this proposal, we put in there that the party requesting the subpoena has to pay the $20 plus whatever mileage. Usually it comes out to $1 and some cents. It's usually someone traveling across town. But again, we're leaving it also with the hearing examiner in terms of his or her discretion on the issuance of subpoenas. And we just don't want it to become such a free-for-all. There are material witnesses, and then there's a lot of other people that someone may want to call in, and I think we need someone who's law-trained weighing that to determine, what's a reasonable amount of subpoena to issue and what's reasonable and what's really a material witness or not. So I think it gives that the power with the examiner. 6 just says if they fail to appear at the hearing, they've waived it. And then Part 7 just talks about making a record of the proceedings. The remainder of the changes are, in 2-64 is very similar. 2-65 is quite similar, but it just further codifies that the $50 processing fee can be refunded if they prevail. And I used the term prevail. It has a very specific legal meaning. There has been a long line of cases adopted that tell a judge when a party has prevailed. And I think rather than reinventing the wheel, I would suggest let's just allow the hearing examiner to use that body of cases. He or she will be familiar with, okay, if we had 3 citations and the party appealing prevailed on 2 but not all 3, have they prevailed? But there's a long line of cases that they could rely on to determine that. And I think it'd just be a lot better if we use the very specific legal term prevailed for that. 2-66, that section maintains the ability to have judicial review from any hearing examiner decision. What we've added, and Paul added the specific language here, is that if they want to appeal it or seek judicial review after a final decision of the hearing examiner, the city is not going to take any more enforcement efforts unless, and it says it in some other areas as well, that there's an imminent danger of public safety or the like where we as a city may have to go in and do some enforcement efforts even though they may be seeking an appeal within the 30 days. But again, if they go to the courts for judicial review, most times, I don't want to say every time, but off the top of my head, I can't think of anything where the judge, a state court judge, wouldn't hold things in abeyance while he or she hears and does their judicial review. But I think, in summary, I think this really codifies what we hope to accomplish, what we want to do to instill public confidence in the system, and it will be additional resources expended by the city, but I hope you will see it as necessary and appropriate. So, and I have Paul Bankford here also if you have any questions. I'm happy to take them as well.
Okay, Vernon?
David, thanks. This reads very well, and thank you for your work on this.
Thank you.
And you're trying to emulate, it looks like, the court practices, even adopting the court's rules of evidence. But I'm sensitive to one area under Section 2-60, Subpart 4, a statement indicating whether the appellant desires the administrative appeal hearing to be open or closed to the public. Help me understand under what circumstances we would allow it to be closed.
In case it's some type of a sensitive nature, Councilor Brown, we want to have that person have the ability to request of the hearing examiner that they want it closed, and then we'd allow the hearing examiner to make that determination, ultimately whether it should be open or closed. There are some very unique circumstances in the state courts where certain hearings or proceedings are closed to the public. I think it's rare in nature, but yet I think recognizing that there may be an exception or two, have it in there and have the hearing examiner with that discretion.
Trying to think on code enforcement what that might be. Can you give me an examples?
I hope Paul can.
I struggle with that. I don't see a purpose for it, and unless I can have a concrete example of why I would probably oppose that line, but I think the rest of it looks very good. Paul, if you have any, you can shed any light on it, I'd appreciate it.
You know, that's a good question, Counselor. And I can tell you that in the 6 months that I've been here, we haven't had any issues that I think would need to be closed. I can envision that there could be something in the future in terms of maybe a business is cited for some type of violation, and some information would be coming forward in that hearing that maybe they felt was trade secrets or information that they didn't want to get out to the public, and maybe there would be a reason from a code enforcement standpoint that we would want to close the hearing on those grounds. It's just something that comes to my mind. I haven't seen anything yet that would require a closed hearing, but we also just, you know, one of the things that is easy to figure out when you've done some of these is there are lots of unique circumstances that arise, and we put that in there just to give the hearing examiner the opportunity, if someone feels like their hearing should be closed, to review the circumstances and determine whether it should be closed. I can't speak from personal experience about anything that I've seen so far that would require a closed hearing, but I can envision that some unique circumstance could arise in the future that maybe we would want to have that hearing closed.
My concern is, Paul, that based on this, I mean, it follows name, address, telephone numbers of the appellant. It almost gives the impression that it's really up to the appellant to decide whether or not it's going to be closed, and that's not the impression I want left with that.
And I think that that's a good point. And let me, you know, since we are just at the initial discussions here, let me think about that a little further and think if we can reword that in a way that makes it clear that the hearing examiner makes the ultimate decision.
And that it'd be rare.
And that it'd be rare, exactly. And I think that that's a good point, and one that I think we want to think through a little further in terms of the type of scenario where maybe a closed hearing would be something that we'd want to pursue.
Thank you.
Michelle?
Yeah, I would agree with that if the hearing examiner is the one that gets to decide, I would fall more in favor of that. I just had a comment then about one of the words that you kept using over and over, David, was the word protections. You know, and you talked about that idea that in Sioux Falls we're very similar to about 2/3 of the communities in the country that have this sort of appeals process. And for us to take a step farther and to provide more protections for our citizens, to me, that's a really positive thing, and I just appreciate you guys working on this. Paul, I know that David's taking a lot of the credit for it. I know you did a lot of the grunt work on it. I appreciate the wording. I appreciate that I could read it and understand it, and I just think it's going to be an exciting thing. I look forward to next month hearing how we pull it together.
Okay, any further questions? Public? Anything from the public? No? All right.
So are we
Any
not
motion
looking for
on
a
this,
motion?
or-
I'll move to send it to the full council.
Well, we did have a request from the attorney's office to hold this for one more month.
Okay.
So that they could clean this up, so.
We're ready to go, David. What are you waiting for?
I appreciate your vigor, but if I may, Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
I think one I came up with is terms of maybe one that would be appropriate for being closed is if you're dealing with a daycare registration issue and you have to have several child witnesses involved. That may be one where certainly making it public and putting some child witnesses through that trauma of having a public hearing, maybe that's one that would be appropriate. Councilor Brown, that's the one I can think of off the top of my head. And I have to claim a lot of credit on drafting this.
I guess to follow up on that too is that
With
I
Paul's
also
help
had
and others,
some concerns about that, and maybe rewording to a request to where it shows the determination will be made by the administration, the appeal person. I think that's probably the
special
better
request.
direction to go. Right, it would have to be a request so that there would actually be an opinion made.
I think, Councilor Anderson, probably a way to draft it would be they are presumed open unless a request is made by a party that they be closed. They presume, the hearing examiner is to presume they are open unless good cause shown why it should be closed. And
Sure.
we'll draft the appropriate language.
Okay. Thank
for
you.
your consideration for next month. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Okay, since this will be carried over to the June meeting then, is everyone in favor of that?
Should we move adjournment?
Okay, move and adjourn? The second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you. Vernon.